It all started on an ordinary Tuesday in 2147. Nobody expected anything big to happen. Just another day of traffic jams, coffee runs, and scrolling through feeds. But out near Mars, something strange blinked into existence. Not a meteor, not a glitch in the system, but a ship. And not just any ship. This one was enormous, so big it blocked out stars in deep space telescope images. It hung there, silent at first, like it was catching its breath after a very long trip. Within minutes, alerts pinged across observatories from Chile to Siberia. Amateur astronomers, people who just liked staring at the sky in their spare time, were the first to post about it online. "Is this real?" one wrote, sharing a grainy image. "Looks like a studio model," another joked. But then official channels confirmed it. Something alien had arrived. Then came the message. It blasted across every known communication frequency, radio, satellite, even old emergency broadcast bands. A voice deep and oddly formal spoke in clear English, then Spanish, Mandarin, Arabic, Hindi, and dozens more languages one after another. "People of Earth," it began, "you are hereby summoned to surrender your sovereignty to the Galactic Empire of Solara. Resistance is illogical. Compliance is expected." Most people didn't panic. They laughed. Honestly, it sounded like the opening scene of a sci-fi movie someone had forgotten to turn off. The grammar was slightly off. Phrases like, "You shall be integrated with great honor," felt rehearsed, like a student reading a script in a language class. Within an hour, memes exploded online. Someone edited the voice to say, "Your Wi-Fi password, please," over a beat. Another turned the broadcast into a lo-fi study track, titled Imperial Demands, Chill Mix. Governments, of course, took it more seriously, at least on paper. The United Earth Coordination Council, a group made up of space agencies and defense ministries from dozens of countries, held an emergency meeting. But even there, confusion ruled. Was this a real threat, a hoax? Some kind of test from a rival nation using advanced holograms or deepfake tech? No one could agree. One delegate argued they should treat it as hostile until proven otherwise. Another pointed out that the ship hadn't fired a single weapon, moved aggressively, or even turned on its lights in a threatening way. It just floated. Meanwhile, life on Earth went on. Kids went to school. Farmers harvested crops. A street performer in Lisbon played guitar under a light rain, completely unaware that humanity's first contact with an interstellar power was happening 225 million kilometers away. That was the strange part, how normal everything still felt, even as history unfolded in the void above. Back in mission control centers and military bunkers, analysts worked around the clock. They studied the ship's energy signature, its hull composition, impossible alloys, no known elements, and its propulsion system, no exhaust, no visible engines. Everything about it defied known physics. Yet the crew, if there was one, showed no signs of aggression. They just waited. After 36 hours of silence from the alien vessel, a second message came. This time it included images. Vast cities under twin suns, towering spires, fleets of ships gliding through nebulae. The narrator called it the glory of the Imperium, a civilization that had united thousands of worlds under one rule. Earth, they said, was ripe for elevation, but instead of awe, the reaction was skepticism. "Elevation to what?" asked a college student in a viral video. "Do they have health insurance? Paid leave? Because last I checked, empires don't usually offer dental." News anchors tried to keep things serious, but even they cracked smiles when reading the transcript. "The Galactic Empire requests that all planetary leaders report to orbit for immediate assimilation," one deadpanned, before cutting to a weather report about unseasonably warm temperatures in Oslo. The truth was, humanity had spent decades imagining first contact, movies, books, documentaries, all painting it as either terrifying or miraculous. But no one predicted it would be awkward. The aliens seemed to expect fear, awe, maybe groveling. Instead, they got memes, confusion, and a global shrug. Even scientists were more curious than scared. "They traveled light years to get here," said one astrophysicist during a live interview. "If they wanted to destroy us, they could have done it already. The fact they're talking, badly but talking, means they're not here to blow us up." Probably. That probably was enough to keep some officials on edge. Defense satellites were quietly repositioned. Emergency protocols were reviewed. But without a clear threat, no one wanted to be the first to fire a warning shot into space and look foolish. Then something unexpected happened. People started talking, not just about the ship, but to it. Using open ham radio frequencies, amateur operators began broadcasting back. Some sent greetings in ancient languages. Others played music, Beethoven, Bob Marley, Bollywood hits. One group in rural Kenya sent a 10-minute recording of children laughing. There was no reply, but the gesture spread. Soon, message to the Empire became a global trend. Artists, poets, chefs, even toddlers with toy microphones, all sent something into the void. The Galactic Empire, for all its grand titles and polished proclamations, had walked into a planet that didn't play by the rules of conquest. Earth wasn't a unified kingdom with a single ruler to surrender. It was messy, loud, contradictory, and utterly unimpressed by titles like High Arbiter or Celestial Sovereign. There was no throne room to storm, no capital to capture. Just billions of people living their lives, most of whom couldn't care less about galactic hierarchies. By the end of the week, the ship still hadn't moved. But something had shifted. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a strange kind of calm. Humanity wasn't preparing for war. They were preparing for a conversation, even if it was one-sided, clumsy, and full of cat videos. And that, more than any weapon or shield, confused the visitors more than anything else ever could. After a week of awkward silence from the giant ship parked near Mars, Earth's leaders finally agreed on one thing. They couldn't just ignore it forever. So they did what humans do best. They formed a committee. Well, technically, they activated the Terran Defense Flotilla, a half-forgotten space unit that mostly dealt with satellite repairs and space junk cleanup. It wasn't exactly a battle fleet. In fact, most of its ships were old cargo haulers with extra solar panels bolted on and paint jobs that hadn't been touched since the 2090s. The person put in charge was someone who'd never even dreamed of commanding a fleet. She'd spent most of her career moving supplies between lunar bases and asteroid outposts. But when the call came, she didn't say no. Not because she wanted glory, but because someone had to do it and nobody else really stepped up. Her crew wasn't made of soldiers either. They were engineers who fixed broken thrusters, linguists who spoke 6 languages, including 2 extinct ones, and a communications officer whose main job was to keep the live stream running without buffering. Yes, there was a live stream. Because of course there was. Within hours of the flotilla being announced, a public broadcast channel went live. Terran Fleet, official contact mission. It showed grainy cockpit views, control room chatter, and occasional shots of Earth slowly shrinking in the rear camera. People tuned in not because they expected a fight, but because it felt like watching a reality show where the stakes were weirdly high but nothing ever exploded. The plan wasn't to attack. It was to engage diplomatically while maintaining a visible presence. In plain English, go out there, wave politely, and see if the aliens would stop sending those oddly formal surrender demands. As the little fleet drifted toward the moon's far side, the agreed meeting point, tension on Earth was surprisingly low. Kids drew pictures of the alien ship with smiley faces. Late-night comedians joked that the Empire probably just wanted to complain about Earth's Wi-Fi. Even news channels treated it like a slow-moving parade rather than an invasion. But up in space, things felt different. Inside the lead vessel, the mood was quiet, focused. Not scared exactly, but aware that they were the first humans to get this close to something truly alien. The crew double-checked every system. Not because they expected a battle, but because space doesn't forgive mistakes. A loose bolt or a glitch in oxygen levels could be worse than any alien weapon. Then came the first real contact. The massive Solaran flagship, the Sovereign of Celestial Accord, as it called itself, finally moved. Not fast, not aggressive, but with a smooth, silent glide that made human engines look like rusty lawnmowers. It stopped just outside lunar orbit, facing the ragtag Terran group like a teacher waiting for a student to explain why their homework was late. A new message came through. Not a broadcast this time, but a direct channel. The voice was the same deep, formal tone, but now it sounded annoyed. Why do you send broken vessels? Where is your emperor? Your high command? Your planetary throne? The comms officer blinked. We don't have any of those. Silence. Then, explain. And so they tried. They explained that Earth had no single leader, that decisions were made by groups, sometimes after years of arguing, that half the planet didn't even agree on what time it was, let alone who spoke for all of humanity. The alien voice paused for a long time. When it spoke again, it sounded confused. You mean, you govern yourselves? Without hierarchy? Well, came the reply, we try. That conversation, clumsy, full of misunderstandings and accidentally funny, was streamed live to over 2 billion people. Comments flooded in. They think we're joking. Send them a group chat invite. Ask if they accept cryptocurrency. But the real turning point came when the Terran crew, running out of formal things to say, did something unexpected. They turned on their external speakers and played music. Not military marches or national anthems, but something simple and human. A piano piece, soft and slow, recorded by a teenager in Tokyo for a school project. The Solaran ship didn't respond right away, but it didn't leave either. Over the next few days, the standoff turned into something closer to a very strange cultural exchange. The Terran fleet sent over data packets filled with photos. Sunrises, street markets, dogs playing in parks. They included short videos of people cooking, dancing, arguing, laughing. Nothing staged. Just life as it was. In return, the Solarans sent more demands. But they were getting weaker. One message asked, "Why do your citizens mock the Imperium on public networks?" Another inquired, "Is the pineapple pizza a test of loyalty?" It turned out someone on the livestream chat had jokingly told the aliens that Earth's true ruler was decided by who made the best pizza, and that pineapple was the ultimate loyalty check. The Solarans, taking it completely seriously, had been debating it in their command chamber for hours. Back on Earth, that bit of confusion became the funniest thing all week. Memes exploded again. Pizza shops offered imperial specials with extra pineapple. A chef in Naples even sent a handwritten letter, scanned and beamed into space, explaining that while pineapple wasn't traditional, love has no borders, not even galactic ones. The crew in orbit couldn't stop smiling. This wasn't war, it was weirdly peaceful. The aliens weren't evil. They just didn't get how Earth worked. And the more they tried to fit humanity into their neat boxes of emperors and subjects, the more those boxes fell apart. Meanwhile, inside the Solaran ship, things were unraveling in quiet ways. Junior officers, used to strict orders and flawless obedience, were secretly watching Earth broadcasts during their off hours. They'd seen stand-up comedy for the first time, and couldn't understand why people laughed at sadness. They'd watched a documentary about bees and cried, or whatever their version of crying was. One even messaged the Terran fleet with a simple question: "Can I visit your libraries?" Of course, none of that was official. The High Arbiter still gave daily speeches about the inevitability of integration, but fewer people on his own ship seemed to believe it. On Earth, life kept moving. But something had changed. People looked up at the night sky not with fear but curiosity. Parents told kids, "That big ship out there, they're just as confused as we are." Scientists worked overtime not to build weapons but to translate human culture into something an alien mind might understand. Artists painted murals of the two fleets facing each other, not as enemies but as neighbors meeting for the first time. And the Terran fleet? They stayed put not as soldiers but as hosts, offering music, stories, and the occasional terrible joke. Because in the end, humanity's greatest weapon wasn't firepower or shields. It was the simple, stubborn act of being human, messy, funny, kind, and impossible to categorize. The Galactic Empire came expecting to conquer a planet. What they found was something far harder to control, a species that refused to take itself seriously enough to be ruled. The standoff near the moon wasn't anything like the old war movies. There were no laser blasts, no tense countdowns, no dramatic speeches before battle. Instead, it felt more like two neighbors meeting over a fence, except one neighbor was from another star system, wore armor that shimmered like liquid metal, and kept asking where the planetary king lived. The Terran fleet stayed put, floating calmly near the far side of the moon. Their ships weren't built for combat. They were patched-together workhorses with dents from asteroid collisions and coffee stains on the control panels. But they had something the Solaran Armada didn't: patience and a deep, almost stubborn belief that talking was better than shooting. The Solarans, on the other hand, were growing more confused by the hour. Their doctrine taught them that lesser civilizations would either submit in awe or resist with violence. Earth did neither. Instead, it sent cat videos. Yes, cat videos. Someone in mission control, probably just trying to lighten the mood, uploaded a short clip of a fluffy orange cat chasing a laser pointer. It was beamed directly to the Solaran flagship as part of a cultural data packet. The aliens didn't understand the joke, but they couldn't ignore it either. Their systems logged it, analyzed it, and, according to a later leak from a Solaran technician, played it on a loop in the junior officer's lounge for 3 days straight. That tiny act of silliness opened a crack in the wall between species. Soon, the exchanges became more creative. Earth sent recordings of rain on rooftops, children singing off-key in school choirs, the sound of waves crashing on a beach in Portugal. In return, the Solarans sent, well, mostly more demands, but tucked between the lines were questions. Why do your citizens laugh when threatened? What is the purpose of dancing if it does not serve military function? Is the weekend a ritual? The livestream from the Terran fleet became the most watched channel on the planet. Not because anything explosive was happening, but because it was strangely comforting. People tuned in during lunch breaks, before bed, even during work hours, much to the frustration of bosses everywhere. It wasn't just about aliens anymore. It was about watching humans be human in the face of the unknown. One evening, during a quiet shift, the comms officer on the lead Terran ship decided to try something new. Instead of sending another data packet, they opened a live audio channel and just talked, not as a representative of Earth, not as a soldier, but as a person. Hey, they said, voice calm. We know you're out there. We're not trying to trick you. We're just like this. We argue, we mess up, we make bad jokes, and sometimes we put fruit on our pizza. It doesn't mean we're weak. It just means we're different. There was silence for nearly 10 minutes. Then a response, not from the High Arbiter, but from a lower-ranking officer whose voice sounded younger, less rehearsed. You do not fear us? We did at first, came the reply. But fear doesn't help anyone. So we chose curiosity instead. That short exchange went viral. Not because it was dramatic, but because it felt real. For the first time, the Solarans weren't just a faceless empire. They were individuals. Some strict, some curious, maybe even a little lonely. Back on Earth, people started doing their own part. Schools held Message to the Stars days where kids drew pictures or wrote letters. A group of musicians recorded a song using only natural sounds, birdsong, wind, ocean waves, and sent it into space. A grandmother in rural India knitted a tiny scarf and mailed it to mission control with a note, for the cold space traveler. None of it was strategic. None of it was part of a grand plan. It was just people being kind in the only way they knew how, and it worked, better than any weapon ever could. Inside the Solaran flagship, cracks were forming in the rigid structure of command. Younger crew members began questioning why they were here. If Earth wasn't a threat and wasn't resisting, then what exactly were they conquering? A planet that kept sending them recipes and bedtime stories? Rumors spread through the Solaran ranks quietly at first about Earth's strange magic. Not real magic, of course, but something equally puzzling. The ability to disarm tension with humor, to turn fear into friendship with a simple act of sharing. Then came the pineapple pizza debate. It started as a joke in the livestream chat. Someone typed, "Tell them pineapple on pizza is the ultimate loyalty test." Another added, "If they say yes, they're one of us." The comms team, half asleep at 3 a.m., included it in a lighthearted message. One important Earth question. Do you support pineapple on pizza? Answer determines diplomatic status. To everyone's shock, the Solarans took it seriously. For 2 full days, their ship went silent. Then a formal response arrived, not from the High Arbiter, but from the ship's culinary division. Yes, they had one. It was a 12-page analysis comparing Earth's pizza traditions with Solaran nutrient discs, complete with chemical breakdowns and cultural context. Their conclusion: while biologically unnecessary, the inclusion of sweet fruit on savory base demonstrates creative risk-taking, a trait valued in advanced civilizations. Earth cheered, not because they'd won anything, but because the aliens were finally playing along. The High Arbiter, however, was not amused. He gave a stern broadcast accusing Earth of psychological subversion through absurdity, but even his voice lacked its usual thunder. It sounded tired, frustrated, like a teacher whose students kept turning exam questions into riddles. Meanwhile, the Terran fleet stayed calm. They didn't gloat. They didn't push. They just kept being themselves, sending music, sharing stories, and occasionally asking how the Solarans' day was going. And that, more than anything, was what the Empire couldn't handle. They came prepared for war, for surrender, for clear lines of power. But Earth offered none of that. Instead, it offered connection, messy, unpredictable, and full of heart. As the days turned into weeks, the standoff near the moon became less of a confrontation and more of a quiet conversation between two very different worlds. No one knew how it would end. But one thing was certain: humanity hadn't raised a single weapon. And yet they were winning not by force but by simply being human. By the 6th week of the standoff, something strange had happened. Nobody was scared anymore. Not really. The giant alien ship still loomed near the moon, their hulls gleaming under the sun like polished obsidian. But they'd stopped sending ultimatums. Instead, they'd started asking questions, real ones, not the scripted kind. Why do you celebrate failure in your comedies? How can so many languages coexist without war? What is weekend again? Earth, for its part, kept answering, not with politics or power, but with everyday life. A farmer in Argentina sent a video of his harvest explaining how he talks to his crops. A group of teenagers in Seoul uploaded a dance routine they'd choreographed to a Solaran transmission tone, turning it into a viral hit. Someone even mailed a care package to Mission Control filled with instant noodles, handwritten postcards, and a small potted plant labeled for space friends. The Terran fleet, still floating near lunar orbit, became less of a military unit and more of a cultural embassy. Their daily broadcasts weren't about threats or defenses. They showed crew members cooking meals with rehydrated veggies, playing chess with Mission Control, or just staring out the window at Earth, quiet and thoughtful. People tuned in not for drama but for comfort. In a world that often felt divided, this strange moment in space reminded everyone that deep down, humans like to share. Scientists on the ground worked quietly, analyzing every bit of data from the Solaran ship. They confirmed what many suspected. The Empire was incredibly advanced, faster than light travel, energy systems that defied known physics, materials that healed themselves. But their society? Rigid, hierarchical, built on order, obedience, and a deep fear of chaos. To them, Earth wasn't just messy, it was incomprehensible. How could a planet function with no single leader? With people arguing on public feeds about whether socks should match? With entire nations shutting down just to watch a ball game? And yet, it worked. Not perfectly, not always fairly, but it worked. And that fascinated the younger Solarans. Leaks began trickling in, not through official channels but through odd glitches in data streams, coded messages hidden in routine transmissions. Junior officers were watching Earth broadcasts. Some had started learning human languages not for translation, but because they liked the sound of poetry. One even sent a shaky audio clip of themselves attempting to whistle "Happy Birthday." It was off-key and cut short, but the gesture melted hearts across the planet. Back on Earth, people responded in kind. Language apps added basic Solaran as a new course. Universities opened pop-up lectures on interstellar diplomacy. Kids made welcome Solarans signs and held them up to the sky during school assemblies. It wasn't naive, it was hopeful. And hope, it turned out, was contagious. The High Arbiter, however, was losing control. His daily addresses grew shorter, sharper. He accused Earth of soft corruption and emotional sabotage. But fewer of his own crew seemed to listen. Rumors spread that some officers had refused orders to prepare boarding protocols. Others quietly disabled the ship's long-range scanner so they could keep watching Earth's late-night talk shows without being logged. Then came the defector, not with a dramatic escape pod or a blaze of glory, but with a simple, trembling message sent through an open science channel. I wish to study your comedy, please. I do not understand laughter, but I want to. Mission Control didn't treat it like a security threat. They treated it like a guest. They sent back a curated playlist, Charlie Chaplin stand-up specials, sitcoms, even silly home videos of people slipping on banana peels, with a note, "This is not recommended in real life." The request sparked a quiet revolution inside the Solaran ship. If one of their own wanted to learn from Earth, maybe Earth wasn't the primitive threat they'd been told it was. Maybe it was something else entirely, something worth understanding, not conquering. Meanwhile, Earth's leaders finally stopped debating and started doing. The United Earth Coordination Council, after weeks of meetings that went nowhere, proposed something radical, a cultural exchange. Not treaties, not surrender, just an open invitation. Come see how we live, the message read. Stay as long as you like. Leave whenever you want. No strings. It was the opposite of everything the Empire stood for. In their world, invitations came with conditions. Loyalty was demanded, not offered freely. But Earth's message had no fine print. Just warmth, and that's what broke them, not weapons. Not strategy. Just the simple, terrifying idea that someone might offer you kindness with no expectation of return. On the streets, in homes, in classrooms, people began to talk differently. Not about aliens or the Empire, but about them. As if they were neighbors. As if connection was possible. Even the media shifted tone. News segments showed scientists explaining Solaran tech with wonder, not fear. Documentaries explored how Earth's diversity, its chaos, its contradictions, might actually be a strength, not a weakness. A poet wrote, "They came to rule us. We offered them tea." Of course, not everyone was on board. Some still warned of hidden traps, secret weapons, long-term plans. But their voices grew quieter, drowned out by the steady hum of ordinary people choosing curiosity over suspicion. And up in orbit, the Terran fleet kept doing what they did best. Being human. They shared meals over comms with mission control. They played old Earth songs on loop. They sent the Solarans a digital photo album titled A Day on Earth. Sunrises, traffic jams, street food, grandparents holding hands, kids building sandcastles. No grand speeches. No flags raised. Just life offered openly. The Empire had trained for war, but humanity showed them something far more powerful. The quiet courage of being kind when you don't have to be. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted, not with a bang, but with a shared laugh over a badly translated pizza joke. Nobody expected it to end the way it did. After weeks of tension, confusion, and increasingly bizarre exchanges about pizza toppings and weekend naps, the Solaran Armada simply turned around. One morning, without warning, their massive ships powered up their silent engines, pivoted in perfect unison, and began drifting away from the moon. No final threat. No dramatic farewell, just a quiet departure, like guests who'd stayed a little too long at a party and finally realized it was time to go. The first sign came when their main channel went silent. Not dead, just empty, like someone had turned off a radio mid-sentence. Then their lights dimmed, their shields retracted, and slowly, gracefully, they began moving back toward the edge of the solar system, heading for whatever distant star they called home. Earth held its breath, not in fear, but in disbelief. Was this real? Had it actually worked? The answer came in one last transmission, sent not by the High Arbiter, but by a group of mid-level officers who'd clearly taken matters into their own hands. The message was short, slightly broken in places, but clear enough. Your world is not ready for order, and we are not ready for your chaos. We will return when both are prepared. Until then, keep your music playing. That was it. No demands, no conditions. Just a strange kind of respect wrapped in confusion. Back on Earth, people didn't cheer. They didn't throw parades. Instead, there was a quiet sigh of relief and something deeper, something like pride. Not because they'd won, but because they'd stayed true to who they were. They hadn't built weapons. They hadn't pretended to be something they weren't. They'd just been human. Messy, funny, kind, and stubbornly themselves. In the days that followed, life returned to normal, but not quite the same normal. Kids looked up at the stars differently. Teachers used the event as a lesson in diplomacy, not just science. Artists painted murals of the Solaran ships not as invaders, but as curious visitors who'd knocked on the wrong door at the right time. The Terran fleet came home. Their ships, once seen as outdated and useless, were now treated like heroes, not for fighting, but for listening. Crew members were invited to schools not to give speeches about bravery, but to talk about what it felt like to share a song with someone from another world. Governments changed too. Space policy shifted from defense to dialogue. Funding poured into cultural archives, language programs, and open-source data projects designed to explain Earth, not as a planet of soldiers or leaders, but as a planet of bakers, gardeners, musicians, and dreamers. If they come back, one official said during a press briefing, We want them to understand us better, not just our tech, but our hearts. And people kept sending things into space. Not demands, not warnings, just little pieces of everyday life. A recording of rain in the Amazon, a child's drawing of two ships shaking hands, a recipe for lentil soup with a note that said, "Tastes better with friends." Years later, historians would call it the amused standoff. Not because it was funny, though it often was, but because humanity's greatest weapon had been its ability to stay calm, stay kind, and not take itself too seriously. In a universe that seemed to run on power and control, Earth had offered something rare: freedom without force, connection without conquest. No treaties were signed, no borders redrawn, but something invisible had changed. People felt a little more connected, not just to each other, but to the idea that they weren't alone in the universe, and that maybe, just maybe, being different wasn't a weakness. The Solarans never came back, at least not in anyone's lifetime. But that didn't matter. What mattered was what their visit left behind: a quiet confidence that humanity didn't need to be perfect to be worthy of respect. That kindness could be stronger than armor, that a shared laugh over a silly meme could do more than 1,000 warships. Even today, on clear nights, people sometimes point to the sky and say, "Remember when they showed up?" And someone else will smile and say, "Yeah, and we just sent them a cat video." There were no medals, no monuments, no grand celebrations, but in homes, classrooms, and quiet moments under the stars, the story lived on, not as a tale of victory, but as a reminder: sometimes the bravest thing you can do is be yourself, even when the whole galaxy is watching. And so life went on. The traffic jams returned. The coffee runs continued. Kids still argued over video games, and grandparents still told stories on porches. But somewhere in the background, in the hum of daily life, there was a new understanding. Earth wasn't just a planet. It was a message. And the message was simple: we're here. We're strange. We're kind. Come say hello if you're ready to listen.